Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out in the rain. Welcome to the Cove and to How to Build a Winning Team. I'm Julie Cranston, Director of the SBDC at UCI Applied Innovation. And if you're not familiar with the SBDC, we are newly hosted at the Cove. We're hosted by UCI Applied Innovation, hence the double logo. And we've been hosted here since about January. But the SBDC has been here in a previous iteration, and several of our consultants were with that group before. So the Small Business Development Center, otherwise known as SBDC, we're a resource for ventures from idea to exit. We offer one-on-one consulting, which is very personalized and relationship-based. We help businesses start, develop, and grow. We help businesses get investor ready, so we help with funding readiness. We focus on high-tech, high-growth, scalable businesses in the life sciences and high-tech sectors. We like our businesses to be scalable, have a prototype, some kind of pitch deck or financial model, and we are able to leverage the resources at UCI Applied Innovation for our clients. We do all of this at no cost. We do this because we are partially funded by the SBA. We offer a variety of services and expertise, from general business consulting to funding and pitching, helping with term sheets, equity and debt funding, SBIR, STTR review, technology commercialization assistance, sales and marketing strategy. If you need help with board of directors, board of advisors formation, we can help with that, as well as hiring and staffing when your business gets going. Again, we're funded in part by the SBA, which can help you start, grow, and finance your business. We have a fabulous website, sba.gov, which I recommend you take a look at. We'd also like to, if you have any questions afterwards, just grab me or write down the email. And we have a website, SBDCtech.com, that has a lot of resources on it as well. And this panel will be featured on our resource page after the event if you want to go back to it and refresh your memory. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Greater Irvine Chamber of Commerce, Troutman Sanders, and again, the SBA. If you want information about Troutman Sanders, they have some over on the table there. If you want any information about our services, they're also on the table, and I'll be around after the event to answer any questions. Right now, I want to introduce our moderator, and the panel will then introduce themselves for How to Build a Winning Team. Our moderator is Don Castle. Don is a retired bank CEO and served 3 different banks in that capacity during his career. He has almost 50 years experience in executive management and service on boards of directors, as well as commercial banking and capital formation. During his career, Mr. Castle has served on over 30 boards of directors in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors, including 7 bank boards. He's a past member of the Board of Trustees at Miami University of Oxford, Ohio, and also the Miami University Foundation. Mr. Castle is a graduate of Miami University and the Stonier Graduate School of Banking at Rutgers University. He has been a senior consultant at the SBDC for over 10 years. He's an active investor and coach for startup companies through his membership in the Tech Coast Angels, and he's a past chairman of the Board of Governors of TCA. Please welcome Don Castle and our panel, who will each introduce themselves.
Thank you, Julie. Are we live? Can you hear me okay? Very good. Well, I'm delighted to welcome all of you today, and thanks for coming out on a rainy day. And hopefully we'll have a few more folks that'll drop in as we go as well. May I ask that you all please make sure your cell phones are turned off and I'll mute so that we don't get disrupted, and I'll do that on mine too, so I'm not guilty of that as well. Alrighty, well, I'd like to call on our panel to introduce themselves, because I think they can do a better job kind of giving you their background, particularly as it relates to our topic today. And so let's go down to the end, and Steve, I'll ask you to go first. Steve Mednick.
Oh, thank you, Don. So I'm Steve Mednick. This is my 13th year at the SBDC. By practice, I was a lawyer and a salesman. Spent a lot of years in technology, healthcare, and finance. With respect to winning teams and all, I was in a lot of early stage companies, very large companies, and was probably responsible for hiring, managing, or leading hundreds and hundreds of people over the course of time on a global nature. And my current full-time job is I'm a professor at USC, so I actually teach this stuff. I teach entrepreneurship and corporate strategy at the Marshall School of Business to graduate students.
Hi,
Holly, go ahead.
I'm Allie Hall. I also spent 10 years practicing law. I was an employment lawyer, and then I moved to Oxford, England, where I studied organizational leadership and did a coaching degree, and then I was an associate fellow at the University of Oxford for about 6 years. I moved to Southern California 6 months ago, but it looks like England out there right now. And I'm an executive coach, and I teach leadership. And I'm currently working with a startup that's grown from 40 to about 300 in the last 2 years. We were just in London, and now we're in London, LA, Vegas, Toronto, and I help launch all of their teams. So when they start new teams, I set them up, get them ready for success, help them create norms, and help to ensure that they're high-performing teams and that they're not just meeting big meetings.
Thank you, Allie. Bill Waldo.
So, my name is Bill Waldo. I'm a former business owner. I actually had a food service sales and marketing company for, I'll just say, over 25 years. Sold a business a few years ago, got involved in angel investing, part of an angel group known as Tech Coast Angels, which some of you may be aware of. I've been a part of that now for the past 12 years, serve as their membership chairman. I'm also the board representative for Orange County. I have been, in fact, today or tomorrow is my 11th anniversary as a small business development center senior consultant. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. So that's my story. I'll stand by it for now.
And Boris Epstein. Boris?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Boris Epstein. I'm UCI alum, so generally exciting to be here. I've, from a few years after I graduated from UCI, I started in recruiting, and I started a recruiting firm called Bink that I've been running now for the last 17 years. We're about a 100% company, helped see it through all stages of its growth. We have a unique perspective into this topic, how to build winning teams, in that the service that we offer is to embed custom teams of recruiters into technology companies. And primarily we work with Silicon Valley technology companies. Over the years, we've grown companies like Pinterest and Airbnb and Square and Stripe, and technology companies of all sorts of shapes and sizes. So perspective I'll be bringing here is from that of growing our own company from 0 to 100, and then in embedding recruiting teams to see both them be successful as teams, as part of the greater recruiting team for those companies, and then helping those companies build the teams that they needed to be successful. So excited to be here on this panel.
Thank you, Boris. Well, let's start talking about how to build a winning team. And obviously, that starts with people. And I'd like to ask the first question, and we'll break it into two parts. But the question is, what is your advice as to how to find both, how to find good employees, and then also, once you've found them, how to go about attracting and hiring them? And these would particularly be the first employees that you would have when you're just getting started in the business. You've got maybe one other associate, and now you're looking to go out and really start expanding. And what I'd like to do is to break this into two parts for our panel. The first part is, how would you go about trying to find those people? And I realize that a lot of times it depends on what the skill set is, but nonetheless, how would you try to go about finding them? And then we'll talk about, once you do find them, what's the best way of attracting and getting them? So who'd like to lead that off?
I could jump in on the finding parts from a recruiter's perspective. We use a practice at our company referred to as market mapping. It's a formal, fancy word for list building, but basically what the practice includes taking the job that you're hiring for, figuring out all the attributes of the job, what skills they need, what experience level they need, where they're likely to be employed, what title they're likely to have at that respective employer. And then you go out and you build the list made up of all of those attributes, and that equals your initial market map. So the sets of companies you might try to recruit from, the level of people within those companies that you might try to recruit from, the communities that they might be a part of, et cetera. And that should get you off to a pretty good start as far as how to find the person, and then using some common public search channels like LinkedIn or other attributes.
Steve?
Okay, so let's go back in time. The way that Don laid it out is you're going to launch a business, and now you think about hiring some people. So we're talking about inception. One of the things that we discuss in class in entrepreneurship is, as a founder, what kind of a business do you have and what kind of business do you want? Because oftentimes that'll start dictating the type of people that you need in your business, not only in the beginning, but later on, but certainly early on. if you think about Jim Collins and Good to Great, and he talks about getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right position, at that very early stage, it's way too early. You've got to find people that are particular to really the industry you're in. And one of the entrepreneurs I bring into class, he started and has built a business that's done well over $1 billion. It is a pure sales business. Pure sales business. And since he was a sales guy, the first people that he brought with him were all salespeople. And that's the center of the business. So understand the business that you're in, its culture that you're developing, so that as you think about reaching out to people in the early stages, you can't put people into specific positions. They have to be willing to do anything. Well, how do they map into that particular business? Over time, things, of course, will change.
Allie?
Just to follow up on what Steve said about culture, so once you've attracted them, and I think it was Peter Drucker, he says culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, you can have whatever ideas you want, but if you don't have a strong culture and the people you find don't fit that culture, business is destroyed. And once the business is growing, at the company that I'm working with now, they have something called Mastery, where every quarter you sit with your leader or manager and you talk about what motivates you, what's your X, what are you loving, feels so good when you're doing it, you're in flow, you don't even know you're working, what are you good at and what do you love? And we're constantly refining people's job descriptions and performance profiles and allowing them to move through the business as the business grows and needs different things. What you hired for when you were small and what you're needing as your business is growing changes, and allowing your employees to grow with the business and to pay attention to who they are and what they need and what's making them happy and fulfilled and helping them grow at work is how you keep them in the business.
Bill?
So, how to attract and hire the first employees, which is a real challenge. Obviously, as an early stage company, most entrepreneurs don't have a pile of money in the backyard to be able to fund and attract the very first employees. The best experience I've seen work is basically networking. It's word of mouth, and depending on the situation, oftentimes it can be some kind of a shared equity position you can offer an employee as an opportunity to come on board. Oftentimes I have clients, they can't pay a big salary, but they can offer a earned equity type position in the company, and it's oftentimes been very successful to bring in and attract the right type of talent.
Well, Bill's kind of helped us morph into the second part of it, and so we'll continue on that for a second. So if we've identified who it is we want, and Bill offered the suggestion with if your pocketbook isn't unlimited, and therefore one way around that is an equity piece, what are some other ways of attracting and being able to hire the really quality people? What other thoughts does the panel have?
I think from a cost per value perspective, some of the different channels that individuals on the panel mentioned, but just to put them into explicit buckets, job postings is a fairly inexpensive way to attract candidates. You can consider that a channel. I'd say of the 1,000+ hires that our company's made over the years, about 20% of them come from job applicants, and so that's companies like Pinterest, Airbnb, and these other great brands. And so it's a great place to just put up a sign into your respective community and see talent make their way through. Second channel could be considered referrals, and so that could be either internal team members that you employ, letting them know about the opportunity, and then seeing those candidates consider, or your friends, or even just posting it up on your social networks and letting them know. Third could be using agencies, so using outside paid help. That would be an expensive one, but that can get you hired help to bring in talent that you need, and then another one would be direct sourcing, direct recruiting, and so actually getting onto a LinkedIn or a recruiting activity yourself as an entrepreneur, which can be very effective, but it would come at the cost of your time.
Any other comments on that?
Of course, oftentimes at that early stage, you don't have any money. And so what you're selling is you're selling the vision of the business, which means you're out searching for people that want to be a part of something that could become great. And so networking and on, finding like people, I think is flat out right on. You got to find those. The people that you bring on early on will likely not be the people, of course, that you'll bring on later down this, because you're competing against others, healthcare, work environment, salary, bonuses. It's a different sale, isn't it? I know you guys have started businesses from scratch. How did you attract your first folks? What did you lead with? What kind of packages could you lead with emotionally, financially, whatever, to get that first person? Because going from me to we is not easy. The me is I'm a founder. The we is we start hiring people. How do you do that?
Well, now I'll give you my response on that. When I started my company, it was a real challenge, excuse me, to find the right talent. Oftentimes it was bonuses, it was setting objectives based on the company growth. We would have incentives that they found very attractive, and those incentives helped me find some good talent. And I didn't get into the equity situation until later on in the years, but oftentimes, again, if you're looking for a CTO or you're looking for a good, strong business development person, it's going to typically require some kind of an equity type position company, especially at that very early stage.
You two are involved with that too.
I'll share from my perspective. I remember hiring our first employees, which were pretty much recruiters. We're a recruiting company, so we were looking for people who we thought could be great recruiters. We started with a perspective, which is that getting access to the recruiting space was very easy, and so therefore the quality of talent in recruiting was very wide, which meant the likelihood of quality to be low was high as well. So we invested energy into distinguishing ourselves from a value proposition perspective, and so the way that we did that was most recruiting companies at the time paid no base salary. They paid a draw versus commission, which we saw as a very easy way to hire, but again, the quality bar was fairly wide. So we decided to put our money where our mouth was. We decided to pay a little bit of a base, which was expensive from an investment perspective, but it allowed us access to conversations with people that we wouldn't have gotten access to otherwise. And we primarily went after, our target was someone who graduated from a top university with 1 to 2 years of experience and looking for something a little more inspiring to be behind. And then from there, we were able to compel some talent to join our team. And then we built a nice base, and that became more attractive to similar type folks that we were looking to hire.
Let me interject something really fast. That's just on your mind. Do not violate federal, state wage and hour laws. You've got to be aware of what's going on here, because there are some job categories you can pay 100% commission, others you can't, yada, yada, yada. So you've got to invest whatever it takes to understand wage and hour laws. So what we're not saying up here is you should skirt. Like, I can bring on interns for free. Warning, warning, Will Robinson, that may get you into hot water, so understand.
I would like to add that these employees at the very early stages, they don't have to be full-time employees. They can work 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, whatever they can contribute, so they can have another income to help offset their cost of living. In fact, that's what I did. My first 3 employees were part-time, which worked out fine for me. And then as the company grew, then developed into a full-time position.
I think there's something also about, beyond the laws and pay, about the story you're telling about the company you're building. And you were talking about why, and you mentioned Jim Collins. He does this exercise about the 5 whys. What are you doing? Why is that important? And then you answer it, and then you ask, and why is that important? And then you answer it, why is that important? You do it 5 times until you get to an answer about why what you're doing is important. And the more, what I've noticed is the more inspiring the founder is, the more compelling that story is, plus some equity in the company that can be built. Like, that's where you really start to sell the vision, and you start to, have a narrative about what you're creating and why someone would want to come with you. You are a leader if you're starting a business, and you're only a leader if you have followers. So why is someone following you? What's the story you're telling about what you're creating that creates followership?
Well, I think there's some good answers there. Let's move on, as we've spent a good deal of time on our first question. We've only got 46 more to go. So we'll continue to march here. Let's talk a little bit about trust, which is obviously an important component of this people issue that we're building our entire presentation around today. How do you go about building trust on your team? Allie, you want to lead that off?
Yeah, I'd love to. The most important thing that you can build on your team. There are a couple of great ideas about that. Patrick Lencioni wrote a really interesting book called The 5 Dysfunctions of Team. It's like a parable, but basically what he's talking about is, you know, the team fails because we don't pay attention to our results. You know, we fail to meet our details or whatever. And then when you kind of move down the pyramid, you realize, well, why didn't we do that? Because we didn't actually have commitment. You know, we didn't actually have buy-in. Someone said, oh, well, we're going in this direction, and you just sort of didn't say anything and said you're going to go along with it, and then you didn't, right? But did you really have the commitment? And why didn't you have the commitment? Because we were afraid to have that, like, real debate. You know, we didn't have that relationship where we could really debate and then agree about the way forward. Even if it wasn't the one I wanted, we're going to go forward. And why didn't we do that? Because we didn't trust each other. We didn't trust each other enough to have the conversations that we need to have. So you need to, in order to build trust, you need to have clear boundaries about, you know, what you're doing, what your roles are, what your responsibilities are, where you stand. You need to have reliability, like do what you say you're going to do, and have others do what they say they're going to do. And if you don't, you're going to lose people. You need to have accountability. If you make a mistake, you say I'm sorry, you make amends, you forgive, and you move on. And you need to have a non-judgmental space where you're making generous assumptions about each other and why we're doing what we want. What Amy Edmondson at Harvard calls psychological safety, where you know you're in this together and you can talk about what needs to be discussed on the team. The dynamics of a team are like a family. Like, you've got to build relationships, strong relationships.
Could I go ahead and tag on what Allie was saying? Creating a cohesive and productive team is always very, very challenging. Finding personalities and skill sets that complement each other is key. We like to build on that foundation through transparency, shared responsibility, and collaboration on company projects. Strong leadership skills are important. However, keeping those communication lines open and listening to dissenting opinions is vital. That being said, once a decision is made, there is no more room for objections or criticism. Everyone must get on board and move in the same direction.
The best teams I ever on, ones where we're all in it for the greater good, period. The priority was the organization itself. And when I saw commitment of others on the team, either you live up to it or they will eat, they will eat you alive.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I was in a company, we were traveling globally, and we realized that we would see each other on a regular basis all over the world. We were a family. We would not let each other down. There was no way. And it was very clear the greater good was at play here. There were no personal priorities. The priority was the organization does well, our customers do well, of course, we will do well. And it was just an amazing experience.
All righty. Well, very good. Thank you. Let's talk the other side of the issue, and that is frequently we see situations where conflict arises, and particularly with multiple people within the organization. What advice do you have for the people sitting in our audience in terms of how they should go about trying to manage conflict when it occurs within their organization?
I'll start off on that one, just kind of piggyback off on the trust one, something that we're dealing with at our company right now, and the exercise that we landed on is it's common for an organization or a team to experience challenges in all sorts of different ways. An approach that we recently took, rather than starting to address all the unique different ways that challenges arise, is to reconnect to the value of having a common purpose and common mission, both for the purpose of building trust amongst the team, but also as a way to align everybody towards that common goal. Example could be, on a team, if there's infighting, if two people are coming from a place of distrust because maybe they're trying to optimize for whatever their priorities are. Maybe it's a project spotlight, or maybe some earning opportunity, or whatever it is that might be driving their interests. But solving for that could help that one specific situation, but optimizing for the creation of a common mission or a common purpose for the group would help not only solve for that, but for whatever other kind of one-off situations may be created.
Yeah, I think I would add, keep coming back to relationships, but the most important thing is that you're building relationships with each other. And in those relationships, you know yourself, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and awareness of others. In particular around conflict, for example, we all have different appetites for conflict. Some of us are really conflict avoidant, conflict averse. We just stay away from it. Others are just happy to go in, have a fight. It's okay. It doesn't mean anything about our relationship. So knowing where you kind of fall on that conflict spectrum and how it makes you feel, and owning that and sharing that with your teammates. We're having a conflict. I feel like it's not going well, and it reminds me of that movie Jerry Maguire when he says, oh, now we're just fighting, Jerry says to his client, and his client says, that's the difference between you and me. I think now we're really talking. Now we're really having a conversation. So being able to build the relationship where you can have that kind of radical candor. Kim Scott has a book called Radical Candor, where she talks about you have to care personally, and then you can be clear and direct. But be succinct, have positive intention, know what the greater good is. What's the generative dialogue we're trying to have here? Not having a fight because I'm protecting this turf or that turf or whatever. What are we trying to co-create?
And do your homework. If you're going to raise a different view, make sure you have a basis for what you're saying. And if people respect each other, conflict is a way to really raise the level of discussion, because different points of view and expertise can come out that can create a better solution. I think that's really important. A lot of us have been in roles in companies where, when I was general counsel of a couple companies, I looked at the CFO and I said, I tell you right now, we're going to disagree on this. Then I was head of sales, same thing. I looked at different parts of other people, and I'd say, I'm going to take a different role than you are. Because out of that, what I want us to be able to do is come to the best decision that we can. If we all agree something is wrong, that's just not going to happen. Within teams, you have different people, hopefully have different areas of expertise that will allow people to learn more and of course, accomplish more because of it.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I'll tag on to what Steve was saying. Staying focused on finding solutions found to be critical. Try to keep everyone focused on moving the project forward and playing a role that emphasizes their strengths. Understand that there are different personalities and styles. Some personality types may not work as well with other personality types. And in these situations, create a buffer by using a third person to mediate any conflict that arises and find solutions that work for both parties. Sometimes people just need to be heard and respected. A lot can be accomplished by listening to each side and working on creative solutions to problems together. It's best if issues and complaints can be addressed to an open forum with all parties involved and focus on solutions.
Is anybody involved in a family business? Okay, this is where this comes into play big time. You have family members that either will not agree with one another, or all are too afraid to agree with one another. And I have spoken to some folks that are in third generation family businesses. They actually bring in third parties to manage that process. It can go a lot of different ways, but it has to be well thought out, organized, guided.
All right, well, moving on, let's talk a little bit about culture, because we touched around the edges of that in some of the responses. I think we would all agree that culture is important, but for the entrepreneur in the room who is also a founder, a CEO, how does he or she go about building a culture that reflects their values and their goals? And what's the best way to tackle that?
You have to know your values, which is easier said than done. Many companies that are trying, because culture just is. I mean, culture is created whether you're creating it or not. It's just the way things are around here. So if you want to be deliberate about your culture, then you have to sit down and think about what is it that I want people to think, feel, believe, behave. What do we stand for? What do I stand for? And what do I want to surround the people that are surrounding me to stand for? And you build from there. I mean, you start with your values, and then you start to add what's your mission statement and what are you building and doing. Because I think Simon Sinek was the golden circle about, why do we do what we do? And if you don't start with what you stand for, then it's very hard the culture will just become what it will become.
So as a founder, when do you start building culture?
Immediately.
How about if not
Same.
before? How about as a kid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you are who you are, good, bad, or ugly.
Culture is the character and the personality of your company. It's what makes your business unique, and it's the sum of the values, the traditions, your beliefs, your interactions, behaviors, and attitudes. I mean, it is who you are. It is critical culture. Correct. I've seen in many situations over my career where an entrepreneur, CEO, would hire very talented business development. 60 days later, he's on his way out the door and couldn't figure out. What I've learned and what they've learned over the years is because the culture. The person had all the talent in the world, right person, but he left just not. So, very critical part of the business, and it needs to start.
So I guess, Don, I should ask, do you have a question on, in hiring people, do you hire for culture? Do you ask questions for culture? Is that important, less important than capabilities, technical capabilities, all that? How many?
And what's your answer to that, Steve?
I'm gonna defer to these folks, because I've been a part of a lot of that too.
Yeah.
I know you guys are much into that.
I mean, what I see when it's not a good cultural fit and we're hiring because we have a technical need, they're in the job for as long until that technical need is fixed enough. But it doesn't work. It doesn't last. So I would say ideally you're hiring for both. Now that would be a perfect world. We're always trying to get that right. The hires that are made just for a functional need at the time don't typically work.
I'll add to that. At our company, we hire for values first, and we consider that non-negotiable. And then 2, we hire for capability, so potential. And then 3, we hire for skills. And again, we have a reason for doing that is because we believe that at least for our demographic, the recruiters that we employ have kind of innate qualities that are that if we could align to them, we have a higher likelihood of being able to train and develop them versus hiring someone who has the skills but maybe light on the innate qualities. That helps us really level set across our team the trust in the new people that we bring on board. And I'll echo Ali's point just around on the culture point. Either your culture could be created, it's kind of just it could just happen to you, or you could be proactive and say this is the type of culture that I want, and then have an active hand in building it. And then on the values point, just from a tactical perspective, 2 approaches that I found work. One is either top down, where you as the leader decide these are the values that I want for my team and company, and then the other one is where you work with your team to figure out what values exemplify the team, and then from there embrace those as the team one. I found more success with the second one than the first one, but I've seen both work.
Yeah, the thing I think I would add to that is that we're talking about quite sort of the concepts around culture can feel obtuse or ethereal, sort of like, so you have to make them concrete. So if you say we have a culture of freedom, for example, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to have a culture of freedom? Like, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, but wait, you're on a team, So what does it look like on the team? So the more that you espouse your values, then you have to start to figure out how do we behave in a way that is consistent with those values, and how do we reward and recognize behavior that's consistent with those values, and how do we, show when this is not consistent and you're not living by these values. But you can't just if you just say, oh, we're this and that and hang it on the wall, it's going to be that tip thing on the wall, sort of 6 months later that no one knows what it meant anyway. Like, you have to actually make these concrete and living values and train people as you grow about what it means to live with those values at this company.
Of course, what happens when the founder goes rogue? We've seen that a lot, or too often.
Breaks trust and the team.
Yeah.
Well, let's give our audience something to think about relative to selecting people once they're in-house and we have landed them and acquired them and hopefully have a culture that they at least understand or at least give ear service to. What if we determine that actually we have hired the wrong person? Now, to keep this part of the discussion simple, I'm going to suggest that we not talk about that employee that, heaven forbid, would be dishonest or that employee that was totally incompetent. If that's the case, I think it's a pretty simple issue as far as what you do to help the company move forward. But let's assume we have somebody that's just not fitting in. And those are issues, and I see some of you in the audience nodding your head, so I think I'm hitting a respondent chord here. How should you go about addressing that? What steps should you take? How long should you put up with it, etc.?
Define not fitting.
It's beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. I'm the CEO, and I have what I perceive to be our culture and the way we should be getting along, and I just don't like the way person A is fitting in, or in this case, not, quote, fitting in. I don't like the vibration that I get or that others in the company get, and we're not that large. We've only got 4 or 5 employees with that individual. Should we try to counsel them, or should we try to just terminate them immediately, or should we give them a work plan to try to work through that, or some of the above, or all of the above, or none of the above? That's what I'm defining as fitting in.
Allie?
Do you want to defend that lawsuit? It just didn't fit in. So let's see. We'll answer as an employment lawyer and as an executive coach. You want to be as so. I'm for radical candor, and as clear as you can be with the employee who's not fitting in an objective, concrete, non-evaluative way, like. So here's what we all agreed. We have these team norms. We all agreed we're coming to these meetings. You don't come on time, or you don't respond on Slack when we're all on Slack all night, and you're just not there. Like whatever the concrete, actionable thing is about what this person is doing that feels like it's not adhering to our values, and then a plan for so what will you do about it. How are you going to handle it? And giving them that feedback, by the way, you've got to learn to deliver feedback in a way that it can be heard, because feedback feels like a shot. People get triggered the minute you give them feedback, right? They say, no, it wasn't me. It's not fair. Why aren't you talking to them? How about that? And they get really, so finding a way to deliver the feedback in a clear, succinct, non-evaluative way. Here are the concrete, objective facts about what our values say, how we live, what we agreed as teams, how we communicate with each other, and here's what you did. And if we see it again, we'll take further action up to and including termination. And I'd give them a couple of chances, personally, especially in California. But other states, maybe not so much.
So, Counselor, are you a big fan of having an employee manual, even when the company only has 4 or 5 employees?
I am.
And why is that?
Because it makes clear what the objectives are, what the rules are, what we stand for, how we're gonna. It's something to. I mean, I just don't want to defend a lawsuit that is, you didn't fit in, because there's a lot of things I can say to that. But if I say, look, we have a handbook, and in the handbook we say whatever we're going to agree to, or even if you just have team norms and team commitments about what you're going to agree to. And codify them in some way, then it gives us something to say, you didn't do what you said you were going to do, what we all agreed you were going to do.
My experience, and this, again, a lot of this is probably going to be subjective, but I learned very quickly that if the decision is made that this employee is just not the right fit for whatever reason, the sooner you make the cut, the better. It's going to be far less costly to make a move soon than to drag it out and go on and continue to try and fix it.
I'm just going to take the moderator's prerogative here to jump in and underline what Bill just said. I was a CEO of 3 different banks. I had, in one case, 1,500 employees. And obviously, I didn't hire and fire all of them directly because we were a large organization. But nonetheless, it is absolutely true. If you've got a problem, the sooner you deal with it, the better. I can't tell you the number of times when I've had people say to me, I wish I had made that step 6 months ago or whenever. So Bill, I just want to underline Bill's comment.
I'll add just some ways to think about it. I found that while it's really easy to tell the stars who are in and the kind of horrible hires who are out, the hardest is that 80% kind of elusive middle. One technique that I've used is my team or my company better with this person than without this person? So do like a little kind of cost-benefit analysis to that, because maybe whatever you're putting up with is worth it because the person's bringing more value, or maybe it's not. But that's a nice way to align on in or out. And then I found in managing someone out, there's three stages that we look at. One is on the concern stage, and that's where you're expressing some concern. You're looking at yourself in terms of how you've set themselves up for success, how you set them up for success, or potentially misaligned expectations or anything like that. Then after you've done that to whatever your tolerance is, a couple of times perhaps, then the final straw, which is this is the 2-week explicit plan that it's important that you achieve these results, or else we're going to really need to look at your employment with us. And then the final is the manage out piece. So I think for an employer, understanding which of those three you're in is a good step to take, and then figuring out how to either manage them out or take a different technique.
Well, if I can change the facts a little bit, especially in a larger organization, what I oftentimes did is said, is this a management issue or is it a person issue? Did we hire the right people? Sometimes we hired the right people and we asked them to do things that does not optimize who they are. I was once involved with a team of people that was global, and we were asking them to do too much. It was affecting their family lives. They were on airplanes all the time. Their performance was dropping, and I needed to find out why. And what I found out was I asked them to do this much. I needed to have them go, I asked them to do this much, this deep. I need to have them go this far and go deeper. And so I actually put restraints on their span of responsibility, had them go deeper, and these great people, their performance relative to who we were serving skyrocketed. It's a different twist. And that gets back to when you start hiring, what do you hire for? And if you go back, so it's not the problem child, it's not the bad attitude person, but we may have hired the right people from time to time. We may be asking them to do the wrong things. Oftentimes in situations like that, I'll say, is this a management issue or is this a person issue? Just want to get it out there.
Yeah, your job is to create the conditions for people to succeed in. And so you need to ask if you're doing that. And what I think's been interesting in watching the startup I'm working with grow is who is succeeding here and who's not. Because we're getting better at hiring the right kind of people and the right cultural fit as we start to notice, these are the people that thrive in this culture because it's an interest, it's a different culture. They've been really, really deliberate about their culture. And for some people, it's the right conditions, and for some it's not. We get better the more mistakes we make at figuring out who succeeds here and who doesn't.
Very good. Well, let's move on. And by the way, we will have a session here of questions and answers. So if you have some questions, be sure and jot them down or remember them, and we'll give you an opportunity to quiz our panel directly as you see fit. Let's talk a little bit about whether or not we should have formal company-wide meetings. Now, the company may exist of only 3 or 4 or 5 people. I'm precluding in this just 1 or 2, but if you've got 3, 5, 7, or obviously larger, how often do you think there should be formal meetings? And more importantly, what kind of agenda should there be? What should be the tone and tenor of those company-wide meetings, if indeed you are going to have them?
Pizza and bagels.
Pizza and bagels?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, is it formal, informal? And that gets back to the culture. And oftentimes, I think a lot of us have been involved in companies of various sizes where a lot of the communication gets done every Friday morning when there's bagels or donuts brought in. And that it's part of the culture too. That's what you're really speaking to. So.
I mean, I like company-wide meetings. I like town halls, you know, and even as the company grows, you can do them virtually. Just, it helps people sort of know what's happening, know what's going on, and hearing from others in the company. And I like highs and lows, and like lows and learnings, you know, or like what are we celebrating, what went well, and what didn't go well, but what did we learn from it, rather than, you know, just leaving it as a low. What did we learn from it? What I am watching happen is just like more meetings and more meetings and more meetings. Like the more people I talk to, and I say, so tell me about your day, and they're just like, they show me their diaries, and it's just meeting. So you have to be careful about the cadence of the meetings and the timing of the meetings and how long a meeting lasts. It doesn't need to last an hour. It just needs to last as long as it needs to last, and lots of informal gathering. That is where culture happens.
I would add myself, I'm not a fan of monthly meetings, weekly meetings. I'm a fan of having company meetings on a regular basis, but have them when there's an agenda set. Too many times I was in meetings because it was the first of the month and we're supposed to have a meeting. And those are not overly productive meetings. What I've learned makes the meetings probably the most effective is having a very specific agenda, being able to clearly define the objectives, and be able to set takeaways, set timelines, and then engage everybody else in the company involved in that meeting, so everybody feels like it's their meeting, not just my meeting. And let it last as long as it needs to, but have some good takeaways where the next meeting we're going to follow up and stay focused on that. For me, anyway, that's been most effective.
John, can I ask you a question? Is a twist on what you're asking transparency?
That's certainly part of it, very definitely.
Okay?
I was going to go down that path.
Perfect. Go.
Yeah, we went from just a shared counter view on regularity of meetings. We used to have a culture where we didn't have regular meetings, and what that created in our environment was our employees would ask questions about state of company, health of company, status of company, and we would always answer them. But because we didn't have any regularity of place to discuss them, it just prompted that like curiosity or sometimes doubt by our team, and that we found to be a distraction, to the point where we decided to set a regular meeting rhythm with a very set agenda where we included transparent sharing of key company vitals, which the company hugely appreciated for a period of time, and then it fell back into the status quo of low appreciation for that information shared, to the point where the vibe now is can't you just email this out, or we already know everything's the way it is because you just talked about it a few weeks ago. So now we're at a place where we need to relook at our agenda, relook at our rhythm, and adapt it to whatever's going to make most sense for our company culture.
I just wanted to draw that distinction between company-wide meetings and team meetings. So company-wide meetings are typically for the purpose of conveying information to everyone in the company. We want people to know this, or we want a forum where you can ask questions depending on the size or whatever it may be. Yeah. Whereas a team meeting is, I'm very much in Bill's camp about what's the agenda, what's the question we're trying to solve, how making them really meaningful and efficient. And most of the team meetings I run, at the end I have a go-round. How good was the meeting? Right. Scale of 1 to 10, what was the value of this meeting?
Very good.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the CEO of the company. He or she is the leader that sets the direction of the company. We also have within the organization managers. And the question is, what is the difference between a leader and a manager? Steve?
No, Bill, what'd you do?
What I do?
You're a CEO for a long time. You never got promoted, did you?
No, I didn't go anywhere. So the simple answer is leaders influence, managers direct. And it's, leaders have people follow them, while managers have people work with them. It's a successful business owner needs to have both. Got to be able to be a good leader and be a good manager of the business.
I don't think any of you have ever heard of the phrase, you can manage a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Never heard it. That's a good one. Thank you. You coined that.
What is the difference? Other comments? Holly, you want to take
I mean, I really like what Bill said. I was just thinking about how you what you're trying to create, because you need leaders and managers both. And when you're trying to develop future leaders in your business, what do? Well, you delegate authority, you empower, and then you're going to create future leaders. When you're just trying to create doers, executors, then you delegate tasks and you oversee the task. So I think I'm just completely on board with that definition, the difference between, but knowing what you need and knowing what you need to create as your business grows. I just add that.
Any other comments from the panel? Okay, let's talk a little bit about another part of the team that we haven't discussed at all yet today, and that is key advisors and also board members. Now, if we have board of directors who are actively involved in helping and working with the company and doing more than just showing up on a monthly basis and reviewing the board agenda, et cetera, but are actively being supportive, that's part of what my question leads to. But I think perhaps a starting point for our audience would be to define what's the difference between a board of directors and a board of advisors. Anybody?
So I'll start. Directors basically have a legal defined responsibility that's basically governed by the corporate bylaw. And they're typically elected by the shareholder. Much more formal engagement with the board of directors. And the simple difference between that and the board of advisors is one's formal and one's more informal. Obviously, the board of advisors is going to consist of some obviously seasoned, highly experienced subject matter experts that understand the business and serve on the board and hopefully help the entrepreneur grow the business.
So let me ask this question. I totally agree. More times than not, an earlier stage company has a board of advisors. They are advisors typically to the he or she or the it. It's a question. In other words, are they typically the advisors to the founder, or are they typically more of the advisors to the entity itself?
My quick answer to that, and all the other ones would be the founder.
Yep.
That's exactly my reaction.
Just need to understand that. And so then the question becomes, how many founders are willing to open up that relationship to others in the organization, because she or he understands that if the it is performing, obviously the he or she is in better stead, and are the advisors willing to step up, which then can necessitate, going from advisors to a formal board where you can more formally compensate. These are things that, in part,
A more formal board of advisors?
No, more formal board of directors, potentially down the road, that are better compensated. So there's a transition period.
One thing that I'll jump in here, one of my rare entries, but I'll comment on one thing here to keep in mind, and that is that you do not need to, not all board of advisors are created equal. All board of directors are created equal. That is, if you're compensating part of your board, you got to compensate all the board. Now you can get selective on the thing, because you may have one who's a committee chair and he or she will get a greater compensation than would be the case if they weren't, et cetera, and we don't need to go into those details. But when you have an advisory board, you can compensate some with options and others you don't at all, and there's no problem with that. You can compensate some at one level and others at a different level. You can have some that have a promise that down the road we're going to set up an option plan for you, whereas currently some of the other board of advisors may actually be under a compensation plan right now. You can do those kind of things with a board of advisors, so you have a lot of flexibility in that regard, and I just wanted to make sure that that was clear in your minds.
I'll just share from a super not formal perspective and not from the perspective of setting up actual boards and actual advisors. I think both serve the purposes. One, and for the benefit of entrepreneurs, I think a challenge for an entrepreneur is self-accountability, because if they're the leader of the whole company, then who do they then report to? So whether through a board or even an informal peer relationship, creating some form of accountability to yourself in what you're trying to do can certainly help develop some rigor in what you're trying to accomplish. And then two, having people that you could go to bounce ideas off of, because it's very common for an entrepreneur to be so vigilant about what they're trying to accomplish that there's some blinders associated with it. And so some widened perspective can certainly help add value. And I think both sets of relationships can help from a validity perspective. So the strength of your board and your advisors helps add value to hiring in the form of your association. And then they're also intended to be able to open up doors for networking, for business development purposes as well.
Very good.
I would just add, I guess, just 2 points. Stakeholder management becomes critical. Who are the people? What is their role? What do I want from them? What do I need from them? As clear as you can be. What's in it for them? Why are they doing this? What do they care about? What do they understand? What's their motivation? The clearer you can be about the nature of the relationships you have with your board of advisors or your board of directors and what you need to do in those meetings so that those meetings matter and you're getting what you want out of those meetings, the more successful they will be.
Okay, well, good. Before we open it up to the audience for questions, and I hope you will have a lot of them, I want to ask each one of the panel members to kind of give a closing comment. We have tried to focus in this hour that we've been in this discussion on building a winning team, and we've talked about a lot of the aspects of that. What would you like to leave, each of you individually, what would you like to leave with the audience as far as kind of a closing thought on how to build a winning team? Steve?
It's really hard. Keeps you up at night. But I think that you need to look to yourself first and foremost and ask, are you doing the right things? Have you considered the right things? Have you sought out the advice of others that have done it in the past? And so one of the things that I suggest to my students as well as clients is once they've reached a certain stage, join organizations like the Entrepreneurs Organization, where you get peers that have done the same thing. So get help. Don't do it alone. It's going to be scary. You're going to make mistakes, but own it.
I think I would leave you with build relationships. Teams are relational. You are human beings, not human doings. You need to build the relationships.
Totally concur with relationships. It is all about relationships. I strongly recommend that if you have advisors out there, use them. You've got industry experts that are willing to give you good information, use them. Be a great listener. I tell my clients all the time, I've learned years ago there's a reason why I have 2 ears and just 1 mouth. I'm going to try and listen twice as much as I talk. Happy 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I think to echo what everyone said, teams trump individuals and or disconnected groups of individuals. And I think teams don't necessarily always need to be under the guise of common employment. You could be a team with your accountant, with your legal professional, with your peers in some of these organizations and communities. So kind of widen your perspective of the team that you have, including your family and others who you're connected with as the support mechanism, help you achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
Okay, well, thank you. We have 2 microphones in the room, so if when you do ask a question, if you wait till the mic gets to you, we'd appreciate it so everyone can hear it. What are your questions? We always need that first 1 or 2, and then we're good.
Hi there.
And there he is. Thank you. You get the gold star.
Oh, great. I just had a question about, I have a startup, and I'm just thinking about whether going down the path of hiring employees or outsourcing the effort, technology. And could you just kind of talk about that and what's actually, because many people have businesses, and so it's possibly feasible to outsource some of the work get done in technology space.
So you're wanting to inquire relative to our views on outsourcing versus hiring and bringing in. Is that basically it?
Buy versus rent.
Buy versus rent. Well, what do you think?
Yeah. There's benefits and challenges with each one. Buy, you have more control, right? When you rent much shorter term. Typically, if it's an independent contract, you're contracting for a specific result, and you don't have as much control over a lot of that. So you have to kind of weigh things out. The way the world has gone the last number of years, it's moved away from buy to rent. There are obviously areas of expertise out there. They focus on things that can be much more efficient for you, and you only need to acquire that particular skills, whatever the case may be, product, service, whatever. Very efficient way to do that. So when you need to buy, you buy for much longer term. So I get back from a legal perspective, I'll always understand where you stand with independent contractors or contracting with a larger firm. It's just understand what's best for your business. Just ask the question.
I believe in outsourcing whenever I can, at whatever stage the company is at. I don't believe in a bloated payroll if it's not necessary. I think that there's a lot of talent out there that you can outsource and utilize when you need it. It's like hiring independent contractors versus full-time employees. Especially as an early stage company, outsourcing to me is a very smart way of doing business.
One comment I would make to go back to something Steve Mednick said early on, and that was his advice as far as getting a labor lawyer to look at things. There are some really fine lines between what is a contract employee and what is somebody who's an independent contractor and what is an employee. And you can't just arbitrarily say, I'm going to call them an independent contractor, and therefore I won't have to do withholding and so forth and so on. There are some real factors there. Be sure you have that guidance and understanding, because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
What's your motivation to do it too? So that's part of what you're saying.
Exactly. Question, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I have a two-part question, specifically for two panelists, and then open it to everybody. First question was to Boris. When you pulled the exercise to refocus on the purpose and mission at your recruiting company, I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about that exercise you went through.
Exercise we went through to come up with a purpose and a mission.
Correct.
Yeah, we're literally going through it right now. For purpose, there's a formula that we follow. It's called a three-tier purpose statement that we learned about. The first is the things that you do. That's the first tier. The second tier are the exciting results, the exciting immediate results of what you do. And the third part of it is the big enrolling outcome, worldly impact that you're making through that effort. So our recruiting company is building a culture that's attractive to recruiters as a exemplification of top employment standards for recruiters nationally. That's exciting because it's attractive to great people. People get to work with like-minded people. And the big enrolling picture there is we raise the profile of the recruiting profession nationally. So that might be an example of that.
Okay, thank you. And then the second part is actually for Ali. When companies go and make this kind of the general big culture, often when I work for a global company, not only does the culture need to be translated to geographical differences, but then department changes, then generational differences and everything. How have you seen in any experiences these subcultures that develop or should develop to kind of tie into the bigger overall culture of the companies?
Yeah, it's very challenging as you grow, particularly if you grow through acquisition, because you start acquiring other cultures. And as you say, the generational differences and the global cultural differences. So you have to kind of do a road show. You have to send, it sounds like Ebola when I say this, but you need culture carriers. You need people to go be on the ground in the new locations. You need to do as much as you can to build those relationships across the globe, across the departments, etc. And even some acknowledgement, particularly if it's an acquisition, some acknowledgement of what parts of the culture are going and what parts are changing, and that you're actually going to probably create a new culture. We're still going to adhere to our values, our drivers, whatever we said we'll do. We're not going to, we can't disregard those because they're the foundation upon which we built this. But we understand that as we bring in, a whole bunch of different people from a different place, that it may change how it looks. Lots of training, lots of exercises. You know, you were asking Boris about the exercises that he does. You need actual, like, real exercises that people do where they move and write and think and brainstorm and talk about what this culture means and what behavior means in a culture like this. But if you can move people that get the culture to the new location for a while, even better.
Thank you, guys.
Oh,
Oh, please.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brett.
There's a for super practical. There's a written exercise. It was Jim Collins from Jim Collins' book called Mission to Mars, which is one that we did at our company. It's a good one to look up. They share real practical step-by-step advice on how to do exactly what we just described.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Hey guys, just wondering, as a founder or a co-founder, how do I know what my role is on a team? And mainly I'm thinking around, you know, as a founder, I think the natural tendency is, oh, I'm CEO. I think when you talk to investors, they probably have a different opinion. I'm just wondering, you know, as you go through the process, how do I know where I fit? How do I find my center, or what I'm supposed to be contributing to this team?
Get a coach.
That's a great idea. Bill, you started to address it.
Well,
If I can't pay for that.
and I deal with this all the time. The founder of the company could be an engineer. Okay, he's extremely good at what he does. Everything is black and white. Everything is perfect, but he's not a CEO. And oftentimes, they need to understand that. Your question is, you know, how am I going to fit into this? And I've learned many times that the CEO that is the CEO is probably the wrong person. He's probably better off being the CTO or the business development guy. I believe that in an early stage company, a CEO is technically the chief everything officer. So he's really involved in every aspect of the business. But as the company grows, you start to realize where the skill sets and the real strengths lie. And it's wise at that point to accept that, understand that, and find the right person. If you're not, for example, you don't feel like you're the right CEO, your skill sets are in the design side of it. Finding a CEO that can run the business is a very smart move. The smarter part is acknowledging it, accepting it, and making the decision to move forward.
Yeah, but nobody can do it as good as you can. You started the business. You know it better than anybody else. I don't mean that in a sarcastic manner. It's just tough. You have to find your center over time. And I think part of what we talked about is if you can recruit people, and I use that term loosely, they may become founders with you. I don't know, where your role, one, you want to be the CEO, which is a different role than anything else. Then you become that inspirational leader, that visionary, and you empower people to do that. Things change over time. It's hard to let go, and some people never can let go. That's why Bill's suggesting maybe your better role later, down the road is somewhere else. But at first, most founders, right, you're in deep with it all, and it's your baby, you're all in. It's just not easy. You just have to learn who you are, and actually getting a coach, being around others have done the same thing to kind of help you understand where you're at, throw suggestions to you, can help.
I think there's a lot about a couple of things I would say. If you think about CEO as chief enabling officer or chief empowerment officer, then your job is to surround yourself with others who are better at some things than you and empower them, enable them to do those things, because you have your, and then number two, finding your own particular leadership style. And there are lots of leadership styles, but which one feels right for you and natural for you. And the third thing is not forgetting who you are, because you start out with this company and it's small and everyone knows everyone and everyone knows you and everything, and the company grows and you have an impact. When you walk into a room, you have an impact, and and there will come a time when you actually can't be in the room because people won't say what needs to be said if you're in the, as the founder, you have huge power. So you have to think about how you use that power to help others be their best.
You have a question over here, sir?
Hi, my name is Hi, my name is Bolesław Boczkaj. Thank you for
can you speak
presentation.
up? Excuse me. Can you speak up a little louder
Yes.
into it?
Hi, my name is Bolesław Boczkaj. Thank you very much for a wonderful panel. I have two questions. One deals with the outsourcing, namely the non-disclosure agreements cover the results that a contractor cannot take out, but not the process of learning.
Process what?
Process of learning or discovery that that contractor has acquired. How do you deal with that aspect? If he's an employee, then he stays on or she stays on, that's no problem. As an independent contractor, your contract has ended, they are off, and your competitor or some other company may hire that individual, and they benefit from the discovery process or thought process that individual takes. So does that come into issue of do you outsource or do you maintain the employee? Or do you accept, well, it's cheaper to rent?
Counselor, we're not here to give legal advice. Do you want to start?
I mean, you can't protect what they've learned.
Yes.
Right.
You know, any employee, I mean, that you make the point. And actually, the more that you try to protect, the less they're looking like independent contractors.
Right.
You know, the more that you're contracting for. So that is always the risk. We hire people, we train them, we teach them loads of stuff, and they leave and take it elsewhere. That's happening all over the workplace as people stay in jobs for shorter amounts of time. So you can't protect that. But you're absolutely right. You can protect their output, the output you bought, but you have to make that decision. But you run that risk even with an employee. Just because you buy them doesn't mean they're not going to learn and leave.
But that's the beauty of being an attorney. So somebody pays you a couple $1,000s to draft something, and you draft it, and then somebody else comes along and you charge them $2,000, and now you do it in 1/10 of the time. It is a wonderful life, right? But certainly with independent contractors, we always have to say retain counsel. Yes, there are non-disclosures. You have to be in a position to be able to enforce the non-disclosure and understand what the positives and what the risk factors are, and just go into it with your eyes open. Get legal help, get legal advice, and then make a business decision based on that. But yes, those are some of the risks.
And the other question deals with the growing or changing of the respective roles and position as the company continues to grow. What methods do you suggest or we have experienced with in terms of helping individuals move from the original hiring role to the new expanded or complementary role? For example, CEO has to learn is an engineer, has to learn marketing, financial aspects and things of that nature. And so do the respective people who are on his team.
You don't know my humor. The first part that was coming to mind is, especially when you go from really early stage to a little later, you become really good at terminating people. And that is, and I know that everybody's going to get upset, more times than not, the people that you can hire early on, they do not have the skill set you need later on. And so that's just a fact of life, and that's something you have to deal with. One of the sessions I did in my class was a gentleman that was well-funded through Tech Coast Angels and all, that had a PhD in IT, very technical. He would come to class and he'd talk about the transition of going from CTO to CEO and what he had to do. And I bring in some others, how they had to learn to be able to obtain, to be able to fulfill that other position. And a lot of them spent years, and they had the support of the organization for them to learn. But that's something, again, you have to go into it with your eyes open. So it's a big difference, I think, maybe was, well, I'm talking about the extremes, and there's plenty in between. You guys want to talk about development of people at some point as you transition from smaller to bigger?
Go ahead.
No, I don't want to.
Well, we have a question.
No, because you're also asking that. I mean, there's people at the low end, lower ends, people at the top, people in the C-suite. They have to learn how to develop into those roles. And
I
you
would
have
just
people in
say
between.
you have to develop people or they will leave.
That is a fact. Very quickly.
But some of them are not developable.
Well, and you get rid of them.
I know, that was my point. I hate to lead with that, but that's just a,
No, you're right. Couldn't agree more.
all right.
Hi, David. I've been trying to shorten this question, but I don't see how I can get any shorter. So basically, since the 2018 case against Dynamex, the new ABC test has made it basically impossible to hire independent contractors. So in the state of
Excuse me, sir. Can
Sorry.
you speak a little slower? Because
Okay.
we're having a hard time hearing you. There's a
Sorry.
blower up here, and we're having a hard time hearing you. So go a little slower for us.
So in 2018, there was a case against Dynamex, and they instituted a new test called the ABC test. It's basically made it impossible to hire independent contractors. So in the state of California, there's no difference between owners and employees to the government. So legally speaking, you have to be paying your founders as employees with overtime, or you're violating wage laws, which means that if you don't have funding or revenue, you have to put your own after-tax savings into the company to pay yourself and pay tax on it again. And I thought this sounded insane, so I called an HR company to verify it. They said it's true, but nobody does it because nobody does it. And mutually assured destruction means that nobody reports it either. But a pissed off ex-founder can sue the company and go after the personal assets of the other founders because California lets wage violations pierce the corporate veil. I don't see how any startup in California can do this without can operate without violating a wage law at some point.
I'm not sure that any of us, does anybody have any, no, we don't have knowledge of that. I apologize, but probably need a different panel for that one.
By the way, I'm working with a company through USC that they got hit with a wage and hour issue, and he's got people on hourly wage. He wants to send them back east for training and all, and he's been told he can't do that because they have to give him 15-minute breaks every, was it 3 hours?
Yeah, I know.
And you can't pay him. He used to pay people during
I
lunch
jumped in.
because he recognized the fact that they were hardworking. You can't do that either. So he was told that he can't send his people back east because he's going to violate California law.
What I would suggest to you is one of our valued sponsors, Troutman Sanders, does office hours here at the Cove for free. There's not a charge for people to be able to come in and to visit with them. And if you'll look up Julie Cranston, who gave the introduction at the beginning, and she's over here in the front. When this is over, she can give you some information, or I think Hannah may be handing it to you right now. Thank you, Hannah. And you're welcome to reach out to them, and hopefully they can help you accordingly and for a very good, on a good basis, because there's no cost involved. Let me go to this lady here who's been very patient. Thank you for waiting.
I think a big question I see for a lot of new startup founders is the issue of outsourcing based on something you don't know versus a tiny task that you could maybe do, but it's way more efficient to outsource that. So speaking in, being able to empower people and look at your strengths and what you don't know. I think I see a lot of people outsourcing technology and knowing nothing about the technology they're outsourcing. And I'd love to know your opinion on that and whether that's a good idea or maybe a bad idea or a dangerous idea.
I'll share that there's probably a reasonable case to do both, either outsource to a professional firm and manage that relationship, and there's huge dividends to that, or hiring as full-time for your team. Probably depends on whatever your strategy is. But consider the advisor topic that we were looking at. If you're not a subject matter expert as to which route to go, you may or may not be. Consider connecting with someone who may have a more believable opinion, and then consider even talking to 2 or 3 of those to get some complimentary views to support whatever it is that you might decide to do. And then whatever it is you decide to do, give yourself like a little bit of a shorter leash in terms of seeing if it's either working for you and then stick with it, or if it's not working for you, then cut it and change course.
I would concur with what Boris just said, Madison. It's at an early stage, as I said earlier, outsourcing is a very wise way to go, especially when you're talking about software development. You're looking for engineers to start the product. As the company grows, obviously having a CTO on board full-time is beautiful, but you don't have the luxury of that at the early stages. So again, I'm a big proponent of outsourcing wherever it makes the most sense.
Any other
I
comments?
think we have time for one more question
Well, I
in the
got an
back.
opinion. If you
Oh, I'm
can't
sorry.
do what's core of your business, you basically have a checking account with declining balance. And the examples I always bring up are people like Mark Zuckerberg and some others that were in full control of what they're doing. How many of you use Zoom? Okay, have you ever checked to find out who the founders were? Do yourself a favor. Look up the founders of Zoom. You will find out that they have like 15, 20 years experience in that particular functional area. They have led by doing. Eventually you can contract for specific, tasks. But in launching any business, if you can't do what the heart of the business is to get it going, all you can do is write checks. That's usually a formula for failure.
We've got time for one more question if we've got it.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Mike. I have a quick question about the Board of Advisors. When do you feel or would you advise that you need one and why? Is there a metric on growth rate? How many years? Is it in goal? Any thoughts on when to get a Board of Advisors and why?
When do you feel what? Would
To
you
get a Board of Advisors that you
Yeah.
guys had up, one of the questions that you guys brought up earlier?
You asked when do we feel something, and then your
When
voice
do you feel
dropped
it's
in.
necessary to get one, a Board of Advisors?
Well, I think I got I'll start with the question. My answer would be as soon as possible. Obviously, as an early stage startup, your team is going to be fairly small. And if you've got industry experts that you know that are friends or you have connections that have, I'll call them subject matter experts, but they have a huge Rolodex or a network of connections over their years in the business that can actually help you grow your business by making a phone call. My advice is to secure a good, solid, highly experienced advisory board as soon as possible.
And if you can't get a board together, mentors, advisors,
Yes.
Spouse.
CEO, spouse,
Yes.
more,
Spouse is a good one.
more
Toughest
better.
advisor I ever had.
The one comment I'd make on that also is that your board of directors has formal meetings. You don't have to do that with the board of advisors. You can have 5 people on your quote board of advisors and never have a meeting. You talk to them individually, or maybe 2 of the 5, whatever. In fact, sometimes I've seen people just refer to them as advisors and not calling it a board, and that really just gets into semantics. So you've got lots of flexibility with a board of advisors, but I totally concur with Bill. The sooner the better. Well, I think we do have time because we're going to wrap for sure by 1:30. But you had a question up here. Can we get a mic to this gentleman, and then we'll wrap it up.
So yeah, good conversation. I'd like to talk more about the difference between different types of managers. Managers who are hired to try to keep a project or tasks online, and managers who try to be a functional manager and to develop employees to their highest potential. Could you all talk more about that?
Well, I spoke about the different kinds of leadership styles. I don't know so much about I guess different management styles. There are management styles. But I think the most important thing is know yourself and know your audience. What you're trying to do is get other people to do what you need them to do, and to do it with even more discretionary effort, right? So what is it what do they most need from you, and what is it that you're able to deliver? But I don't know the answer to the question about functional versus what the other structural you said. I don't know.
Obviously, different disciplines require different types of managers or leaders. It gets back to understanding the nature of the function, whatever. I remember selling IT into companies, and I can tell you the operations director was very different than the other people. Very task-oriented, it's heavy-fisted, or others are different. So it's understanding, getting the right person in the right job that has the right personality and whatnot. But that's down the road.
All righty. Well, I think we've reached a time to call it a day, but I hope you'll join me in thanking our panel, and we hope you've enjoyed the meeting.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And if you can take a look at the board over here, we have some upcoming workshops and events. Please go to our website to sign up for those, SBDCtech.com. Thanks so much for coming out in the rain. I'm so glad we taped this because I'm going to watch it every day. Thanks so much.